47. What's that soul in the 47? Shot with the soul in the 47. No wage, no guarantee. No lala on the back now. No country, no fall. Back to the peasant, to the Palestinian born. تلم ربنا معبود راسمة صنعه ضبط الحزم حنا الجنوب حرب وسلم رغم عن حدود عنا حلم الغياب نستقبله يا ابن العين يا ابن الله يا ابن النبع يا ابن البحر ابن السمكون السمقاء هاي الزقة وهاي احنا بنت العين بنت الله بنت النبع بنت البحر ابن السمكون السمقاء هاي الزقة وهاي احنا. What's the soul of the 47? What's the soul of the 47? What's that soul of the 47? Shot with the soul of the 47. Find the fruit on the tree. Send it off to wherever you please. Make sure that the money comes back. Going back to the peasant, to the Palestinian born.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome once again to NGP Talks with me. I'm Zahir. I am the president of NGP. Me and the board welcome you very much to this event in this series of NGP Talks. And tonight, again, is another great Palestinian that we will be sharing with you. Now, before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about NGP. Again, NGP is New Generation for Palestine. We are a membership organization. Let me throw our mission up here again real quick on the screen. Our mission is to create a network of Palestinian-Americans to bond with and empower each other, to promote and celebrate Palestinian Arab culture, to preserve and disseminate Palestinian narratives, to educate the public about Palestinian history and heritage, and to articulate and advocate for a peaceful and just future in our homeland, Palestine. And so we've done lots of events over the past few years. And here in the time of Corona, we've now started this new series called NGP Talks, where we talk with Palestinian Americans who are doing really cool and amazing things around the country. We started about a month ago. We spoke to Iman Judah, who was just elected to the Colorado State House out near Denver. A couple weeks ago, we talked to Tahani Abushi, who is running for Manhattan DA. And tonight's guest is another wonderful Palestinian woman. I mean, let's be honest, most of the overachievers in the Palestinian community are women. And another wonderful Palestinian woman, she is the state representative in the Arizona State House for the Democratic Party. Joining us all the way from Arizona, our sister Athena Salman. Hey, Athena.
Hey, it's good to see you. It's good to see everyone tonight.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. It's December, so the last month of what has been the strangest, most bizarre year, I think, in modern history. So I can't complain there, not at all.
Yeah. I mean, it has been a weird year. We found ourselves locked up, which I guess for Palestinians is not that weird, but I mean, still, curfews and shutdowns are not that weird for Palestinians, but they're unpleasant nonetheless. So, Athena, before we get into, your foray into politics and learning about that side of you, we want to know the story. We want to know the origin story of Athena, what brought you to where you are today, how your Palestinian identity sort of informed all of that. So tell us a story back from your roots in Palestine all the way up until right before you run for office.
Yeah, wow. How much time do we have?
We have 3 hours. So go ahead.
I feel very lucky. I feel very privileged to be of Palestinian heritage. My dad is originally from Bidu in the West Bank of Palestine, and he immigrated to the United States in the 1970s with just a suitcase and a dream of a better future for himself and his family. And so he moved to Chicago, which is where he originally met my mother, who's born in Chicago, also to immigrant parents. My grandfather was from Mexico and my grandmother is from Germany. And eventually the family ended up in Arizona. That's where I was born. And, I've had a pretty good life in Arizona. I grew up working middle class. So the neighborhood I grew up in had great public schools. I always felt like I was very challenged and I very much enjoyed my education. However, I didn't realize growing up how much darker, I guess you could say, I was than the other children and how different we were per se, because it was definitely a predominantly Caucasian, very conservative neighborhood in Phoenix I grew up in.
Yeah.
And so after September 11th, my whole world just flipped upside down. And suddenly, this new American family that was just as American as anyone else, suddenly, my dad got death threats. Like I got, my teacher said horrific things, and my older brother got bullied while he was in high school. So it was just different. And that's coupled with, growing up in a country where the media only had already one story of who a Palestinian is, what a Palestinian is. Right. So compounded with this general hatred, especially in my community, directed towards the Arab and Muslim population, that for me was just a very defining moment growing up. So I think oftentimes now as a state representative, I often think about the 12, 13, 14-year-old version of myself who really didn't see people in elected office who were even just doing the basic, like, Arabs are people, like they're one of us. like we're just talking like bare minimum, like not even policy, just like these are our fellow human beings. But
well, I think a lot of Palestinians and Arabs go through that in America, where like we know we're different, but it's like cultural different. It's not a big deal, and then all of a sudden, like something happens, and that cultural awakening turns into something like a political awakening, where you realize like there's a certain gravity, whether we like it or not, to being who we are if you're Arab, and like especially if you're Palestinian. And for you, it was, was 9/11. For me, I guess I'm a little older than you. For me, it was the first Gulf War. I was running for class president, and then we bombed Iraq, and somebody wrote on my face, "Go home, terrorists." And I was like, oh, maybe I'm different. Maybe I'm a little bit more different than I thought. So I mean, yeah, this is our lives. Okay, so your dad takes you and your mom and you to Arizona. I guess I mean, Chicago's a little chilly, so you move all the way to Arizona. Now
that's like literally, not to cut you off, but that's literally like, it got too cold in Chicago.
Yeah, no, listen, Arabs can't. I mean, we're not meant to handle the cold, but for some reason, most of us are in Chicago and Detroit. I don't know, I don't understand, but that's where a lot of us went. So then your dad moves out to the desert, and you grow up there. Now, let me ask you this, and especially since you came from like a bicultural or biracial family, was your dad sort of drilling, Palestine into you from a young age? Was that history of our struggle and our dispossession, was that part of, your upbringing?
Yeah, it definitely was. Especially, just learning about the stories back in the old country and the miles and miles he had to walk to school.
That's right. God, I think they're lying about that. I feel like they're lying about that.
No, you know what though? So I've only been able to go once in 2005, and we did go to where my dad was born, and at the time they were structures, but it was literally like a hole in the ground. He was like, that was where I was born. So I believe all of it. I really do. And it's just like I don't. So going in elementary school, I remember going to protests and demonstrations in support of the self-determination of the Palestinian people and in opposition to the occupation that continues to this day. So I remember doing, like, those are my first protests is around this issue. But I mean, just being Palestinian and having relatives and having, family members who are Palestinian, politics didn't necessarily choose me, or I didn't necessarily choose politics. It kind of just chose me because there was this false narrative of, Palestinians are this type of people, but the Palestinians in my life were very joyful. They were very welcoming, would literally like donate the shirt off their back if someone needed it.
Right.
And so it was just, I was always very sensitive to that. And then how American politicians would talk about my community and essentially it's scapegoating, it's scapegoating a marginalized, vulnerable segment of the population in order to score some kind of political points or get some kind of donation or, right. There's many of that in politics. So and for my father, for all the good stories about my city, who I had the privilege of meeting before she passed, and then my city, who I never unfortunately got to meet because he passed before I was born. I think the other thing that makes me very sensitive to our civil rights and our constitutional rights in this country is the fact that, when my dad demonstrated in Palestine and in the old country, he was actually abducted and tortured by the Israeli military on his route to finals week at school. He had to repeat a grade over it. So it's something that just learning the whole spectrum of stories and the full experience of the Palestinian people, it's something that I hold dearly in my heart. And it's something that, and yet we continue to rise, and yet we continue to resist and continue to move forward in spite of all the opposition and oppression that we have faced in our history. It's something that I'm very proud of, and it's something that's given me a lot of strength in my life.
Yeah, I mean, those are the stories they should tell us. I mean, tell us that you got arrested and abducted by the police. Instead, they're lying to us about 5 miles uphill and 5 miles uphill home. I mean, no, I'm just kidding. My dad used to say that. My dad used to say I walked 2 miles uphill home and 2 miles uphill on the way there, and everything was 2 miles uphill. Like there was apparently nothing downhill in the whole thing. It was only everything uphill. But no, I mean, that's our struggle, right? It's kind of weird, Athena. I always say that when I go to Palestine, is that you get introduced to people, because the struggle and this thing takes on a whole different sort of definition there. you get introduced to people in a way that you do not get introduced to anyone anywhere else in the world. So, I always tell the story where I was walking down the street with a friend of mine in Ramallah, and she wanted to introduce me. We ran into a friend of hers, and she wanted to introduce me to him. And she says, "Hey, Amir, this is my friend Ahmed. He's amazing. He's the best man you have ever met in your whole life. He was in jail 10 years. Like this, this is like, I'm supposed to congratulate him, thank you very much. But I mean, that is our life, right? Hearing about those things, and it really puts things, but we don't understand it when we're young. Sometimes we got to get a little older to fully understand it. All right, so you're doing that, you raise, and then in 2000, before 2016, you decide that you're going to run for office for the state house in Arizona. How did the idea of running for office and then eventually doing it, how did that all come about?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate. I come from an activist background, and the reason that I just draw so much strength and power from that is being an activist and being an advocate for a variety of issues, right? Where I started was actually advocating for higher education. By virtue of being an activist, you are challenging power structures. You are challenging the status quo. You are going up against powerful institutions, powerful people, and basically challenging them to create something that's more positive and that will uplift more people than what we currently have. So when I was in high school, just the aftermath of 9/11 really had me disillusioned about politics. I kind of gave up and just focused on my education. And then when I was a sophomore at Arizona State University, Arizona had a Democratic governor, but she had left to go work under the newly elected Obama administration. And so we overnight had this hateful woman, Governor Jan Brewer. She was our Secretary of State, which was the next in line. Unfortunately, many of you, maybe not all of you, but too many of you probably know who she is because of not only the austerity measures, the draconian, awful cuts to higher education and just our whole public infrastructure. But, it's that intersection of not only my Arab heritage, but then when I was in college, and specifically, the legislature had passed the Show Me Your Papers law, the Senate Bill 1070.
Yes, I remember that.
The Latino community. So then as a Mexican American, I have family on both sides who were impacted by that, who, regardless of their documentation, regardless of their citizenship status, the idea that in America, in Arizona, that we were going to establish a government that can stop you because of what you look like and ask for papers. Like that is like racial profiling 101. So again, with the dissolution, the protests were phenomenal. Like it is just, it's 10 years ago this year that Senate Bill 1070 passed. And there was just not tens of thousands, there were hundreds of thousands of people who just turned out in the streets. Like it was just so much energy. And then we took that energy into a boycott. And then from there, like a group of citizens recalled and ousted the Senate president, who was the prime author of Senate Bill 1070. And so I think like having that happen in my early 20s, and then my last year of college, I got to work on a city council race in Phoenix where, traditionally the Democrats, and Omar, I'm sure you're very familiar with this, traditionally Democrats are like, oh, we just got to talk to the swing voters and we got to fight over them. And that's why we got to stay in the middle, yada, yada. Yeah. So that year in 2011, in this municipal election, we were like, there's a ton of Latinos here who never voted before, who are eligible to vote. Let's go talk to them and see what happened. And Latino voter turnout increased over almost 500%. We got the first Latino who wasn't a Republican elected ever in that district. And I was hooked. And I was like, you know what? I bet you in 20 years time, it only took 10 years, but I bet you in 20 years time, we could flip this state blue. We could elect the next president. We can have US senators who are Democrats. We still don't have the governor, but coming in 2022, and that really put me on the path where I became civically engaged in state and local government, because I truly believe that's the bread and butter of our democracy.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. I mean, and you're right. The Democratic Party for too long has campaigned to the middle. I mean, if you want to govern to the middle, that's one thing. Okay, we can argue about that. But campaigning is about getting people excited, man. It's about widening the base. And if they don't do it quickly, they're going to lose those people either to a third party. I mean, not to the Republicans probably, but people become disillusioned. But I mean, that's great that you guys were able to do that. We do the same thing in Dearborn. We reach out to communities that are untouched by politics. Those are the people that you can get to be energized, So I think it's great that you did that. We already have some comments from Facebook, Athena. We already have a task for your staff. Palestinians, we start doing research right away. So apparently somebody went to your Wikipedia page, and we have a request to change West Bank to Palestine.
Do it.
Wikipedia page. Yeah.
It's crowdsourced, so go for it.
Yeah.
I saw that the other day, and I was like, that's weird. My website says Palestine. It does not say
I know.
Palestine.
I know. I went to your website. Yeah. So just so you know, Qusay, her website, and I can affirm this because I basically copied and pasted her bio from her website to the Facebook page. Her website says Palestine. So these Wikipedia pages are made by users. I encourage everyone out there in the world, go make edits to her Wikipedia page to take away West Bank and write in Palestine. So let me ask you a little bit about growing up in a Mexican Palestinian house. I mean, that's like two very, how can I say this? Vibrant cultures. One might say two very loud cultures. Your parents, I guess, did your dad speak Spanish? Did your mom speak Arabic? They communicated in English. Like, what was that? You have you learned both accents? I mean, Athena, what was it? What was it like?
I love my dad's accent. My mom, it's so interesting. I didn't realize until I made a campaign video in 2018. My mom was like the star in my video, and she did the voiceover for all of it. And I didn't realize that she had a very Midwestern accent. Like the way she said Chicago, she was like, Chicago. I was like, oh, wow. I grew up with you and I never picked up on this. So no, my dad speaks English and Arabic. My mom speaks English and Spanish fluently. The kids only speak English fluently. So, that's, man, I could be working for the State Department right now if I spoke Spanish, Arabic, and English. But my grandmother, she's awesome. She speaks English, which is where she met my grandfather in an English class in the 1950s. She speaks German, her native tongue, and she speaks Spanish. So
wow.
For me, it's just like this is my American experience. And this is literally should be the American experience of millions of people in this country. And I just cannot, even with a lot of the people on the other side of the aisle that I work with, I just can't fathom why this isn't routinely celebrated and cherished, because I love the music of all three. Well, I don't really listen to any German music. I'm not gonna lie.
What is German music? I mean, it's like some weird techno. I'm not sure what it is exactly. Yeah, that's right.
But having traditions of all three cultures, of Arab culture, our holidays were very German influenced, and then Mexican culture. Yeah. I love it. It feels like home to me.
Yeah. And something I want to say, because sometimes people, and I've never referred to this, and I never will. Sometimes people talk about people with one Palestinian parent as like half Palestinian. I hate putting fractions on identity. You are Palestinian, you're fully Palestinian, fully Mexican, fully anything else you want to be, but you're 100% one of us. Sometimes people are like, well, somebody's half this, I'm like, there's no halves, especially when it comes to Palestine. Like, if you're Palestinian enough for, AIPAC and the Israeli lobby to mess with you, then I think you're just as Palestinian as anybody else. And speaking of that,
never invited me to any of
Oh,
this.
they don't. They don't, Athena. Oh,
No.
okay.
The best part though, it's so funny. The best part. So I never get that from my Palestinian side. Like, it's very much, and the community's small in Arizona too. So if you're one of us, you're one of us. You're all in,
Right.
regardless of whether you're.
Yeah, we don't have the luxury. Yeah, we don't have the luxury to kick anybody out.
And so I was talking to a fellow member who went on one of those trips, and I was like, I never got invited. And they're like, oh, well, they're only inviting the Latinos. And I was like, and that's where I get it. It's
right.
Latinx,
No, politically, politically, you're Palestinian. As far as AIPAC is concerned, you're Palestinian. All right, so that takes us now all the way up to around 2015. You say, I'm gonna run for the state house, and I can only imagine Palestine. I think I met your dad once. I can only imagine Palestinian dads, my dad got super excited when I ran for class president in the 7th grade. Okay. So, I mean, you're running now for the state house, and I'm sure your dad gets very excited. And talk to me about that. I mean, was that the first time you had ever run for anything in 2016?
No, it's not, but it's the first time that I actually won.
Okay.
I ran for student government twice, and when I was at the university, I ran for vice president, and then I ran for president. I lost both times. I got myself appointed to the student government senate. And Arizona State University, if it's not the largest university in the country, it was at the time. Like, it's massive. So it was like to a certain extent, like governing the population literally that's larger than cities. But when I decided to run in 2015, it was so interesting because at that point I was actually working for our local Girl Scouts here in Arizona, and I had the privilege of facilitating a group of high school girls who were just so incredible. They were so intelligent, so articulate, and I remember just having a conversation with them one day, after we had done this facilitation session, where they just opened up about literally like basic form of sexism that they are still experiencing, and that there's still, people telling them that they can't be a Marine because they're a girl, or, right. Teachers not calling on them, but calling on the boys in class, even though they have a passion for the subject area. And so at that point, I was, I think, like 25 years old. And so I was like doing the math, and I was like, I'm not even, some of these girls, I'm not even a full 10 years older. And yet the world really hasn't progressed as far as I'd like it to be when I was sitting in their shoes. And the last shoe that was waiting to drop, that I think just pushed me to run so young, because it was definitely not part of my plan. Like, I was definitely, when I was protesting SB 1070 at 21, I was not like, and I will join you in 5 years. That was like not what I was chanting. But the Girl Scout Research Institute, great organization, does a ton of research on the needs and well-beings of girls. They did a pulse poll during the 2014 midterms, and they found that the vast majority of girls are interested in politics. But when they asked these girls, these 11 to 17-year-olds, do you see yourself having a career in politics? That number drops down to like less than a third. And part of it has to do with representation, and part of it has to do with not seeing enough women in government, especially young women, and then the mentorship and the opportunities and the doors that get opened as a result of that. So when a seat opened up in 2015, like, that was the opportunity. Like, if you ever want to run for office, and I encourage people who are listening tonight to seriously consider running for office, reach out to me if you have questions. I'm happy to answer them. But one of the best ways, one of the greatest opportunities to get your foot in the door is in an opening versus challenging an incumbent. You can challenge an incumbent. It's just much more difficult to actually win that seat than when there's an open seat. There's no incumbent, so any newcomer can take it. And at that point, it just felt, based on my organizing experience, based on my activism, and then based on the work that I was doing with Girl Scouts and later with a state agency focused on early childhood development, I just felt like we need more diverse voices. We need people who feel a sense of urgency to actually turn the state around and really represent the voices that are being left behind, and the people who are on the front lines who are hurting the most by these decisions that, quite frankly, only benefit the wealthy, like the top 1% of the 1%. Like, this is not a government of, by, and for the people. So that was literally right before I made the decision to run. And of course, both parents, my dad and my mom, were just so excited. Like, there was no hesitation. They were like, cool, we're game. My dad's like, I'll drive you everywhere. My mom's like, I will knock on every door. And they did. They did. Yeah. They were my best volunteers the first time I ran. It was awesome.
Well, that's amazing. And so there was a seat opened up. I guess, are there term limits in the Arizona State House? So is that how a seat opened up?
There are term limits, but it actually was just the senator moved out of state. And so the two representatives were primarying each other for that Senate seat. So there was actually two. In Arizona, every single district has one senator and two representatives. It's different for every state legislature. You got to research what yours is. But one of the seats had an appointed incumbent, and then the other seat was just wide open. So I just treated both seats like they were open, because that's
very cool
how I ran. Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone, again, I'm here with Representative Athena Salman from the Arizona State House, proud Palestinian-American. I have put a link in the comments if anyone wants to join into the studio to ask a question live on the air with Athena. Please use the link that you see there. You can log into our studio. You got to turn on your camera, and you got to turn on your sound if you want to get in. Athena, so we go to 2016. All right. Did you have, I know some states do it differently. Was your district sort of like a Democratic district, and the primary was the whole game, or was it also contested in the general election as well?
Yeah, it was technically contested in both, but my district is very heavily Democratic because we have the university there. We have several majority minority. It's actually a majority minority district. There's a lot of heavily Latino neighborhoods. We have a sovereign tribal nation in my district. So it's a very Democratic district. So every single year that I ran, it's really, first getting the seat in 2016 and then keeping my seat in 2018 and 2020.
Did you have primary challenges in 2018 and 2020, or just general election challenges?
I had a primary challenge this year. I did it in 2018. And it was, this is how Arizona's changing, because the first time I ran, there was like no independent expenditure money. It was literally every single campaign, bring your best game, let the best people win. For those of you who don't know what independent expenditures are, that's money coming from outside the district, from outside a candidate's campaign, trying to influence the outcome of the election. So this year, it was very interesting. So I always run clean. Arizona is one of two states that allows candidates to publicly finance their campaigns instead of privatize their campaigns. And so for me, it's been great because I haven't had to take lobbyist money. I don't have to take corporate money or any of that money that really dirties politics. But it's also part of the reason why I can be very outspoken and very progressive in the Arizona legislature. And so it was projected, unfortunately it did not happen, but it was projected that we were going to be in the majority in the legislature this year. And it is the first time that corporations and Republicans spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in my primary to try and get a seat in the legislature, try to get a Democrat who was more sympathetic to Republican and corporate causes than someone like me. So when I was talking to the voters, I was like, well, here's who's spending against me. And they were like, that's a great endorsement. I'm voting for you.
And how did that work out for that other candidate in the primary this year?
Oh, we beat them.
Okay, good. Yeah. Good. Now let me ask you about a thing that you really spearheaded, but I was lucky to be a little bit a part of it. Is that in 2016, I think it was 2016 or maybe 2017, Arizona passed an anti-BDS law where they forbid the state from contracting with, vendors or individuals or companies that are pro-BDS, which, of course, for people watching, is the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement against Israel in favor of Palestinian rights. And there was one version of it that got, overturned, and then then they tried a new version, but basically still had the same unconstitutional provisions in it. And you sort of spearheaded an effort in the legislature and in the activist community to, fight this. And you brought me down there. I spoke from a legal point of view at the Arizona State House, but you were there sort of running that. Obviously your Palestinian heritage had something to do with it, but what about what are the values that push you to do that? That's my first question. And my second question is, if you weren't there, was there anybody else that would have done that? Tell me about that story a little bit, and then we'll get to some of our callers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am so grateful you came out there to testify as an expert in the subject. We had Ryan Suto with the Arab American Institute also come out and testify. And the other side also flew in people from National to testify why they thought this was a good bill. But, for me, it just hit home on multiple levels. First, being something that is very much in the Palestinian community, the opportunity that is a right in this country to boycott should not be infringed upon by government, regardless of whether or not government likes the entity or likes the target of the boycott. And so, for me, and then just being someone whose community would be the first in line to be negatively impacted by this, when you look at the vote count from when the law originally passed in 2016, and then when the updated version to try and circumvent the court order striking and joining the law since it's unconstitutional, when you look at the vote count, it changed dramatically. I think at the time, no Republicans voted against the bill. That's just the sad truth of where the Republican Party is at on our right to boycott. But when you look at the Democrats, I think in 2016, there was less than 20 Democrats, maybe there was 16 who voted against, the rest voted in favor. And then, that year, I think we got the number to 24 or 25, which was, a heavy majority of the Democratic caucus, because there was 29 members or something like that. Sorry, I'm getting a little numbers.
Yeah, no, and then I remember when I came down there, then they ended up putting it through the committee that we testified in front of that day. It was pretty partisan. You had a couple progressive Democrats vote with you, and then a few months later. So that law, so they modified it a little bit, but that law now is still currently on the books, right?
Yeah, it's on the books. And then I'm not sure if the lawsuit now is moot, since they carved out the plaintiff, which was the whole goal of changing the law. So unfortunately, and it was actually in 2019. Because 2020,
that's right. Yeah.
What they tried to do this year was they actually tried to take it a step further. So there's a strategy that was developed at an American Legislative Exchange Conference, or ALEC conference, which is basically a conservative lobbyist group that is funded and controlled by corporations that a lot of Republicans will attend and get legislation to run. And so The Guardian had this great article about how at an ALEC conference, there was the idea to use the International Holocaust Remembrance Associations or Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism, and to start codifying that into United States law at the federal level and the state level, specifically so that they could start cracking down and start infringing on speech that is critical of Israel, speech that is in support of Palestinian human rights. And fortunately, we were actually able to stop that bill this year. It will be coming back next session, but I do think it caught a lot of people off guard in the community here, and we're very fortunate that we were able to stop it this year, because the insidious thing of what that bill was going to do is it was going to put that definition in the criminal code. So
Wow.
if you were participating in civil disobedience, which, we see a lot of like intersectional work between border activists and Palestinian solidarity activists working in tandem to try and just raise a variety of human rights violations and abuses that are happening throughout the world, throughout the globe. And there was an instance at the University of Arizona where students were protesting Border Patrol on campus and connecting that to the IDF. And if this law had been in effect, those students got arrested. They got charged, I believe, with felonies, and they could have had it used to create an aggravated factor to extend their prison time for doing activities that is protected under the First Amendment. So it is a very dangerous piece of legislation. And I know for a fact that because I'm in the legislature, I was able to do a lot of organizing on the inside in tandem with people organizing on the outside. And I think if I wasn't there, I think that thing would have sailed through and become law already. And so
No, I mean, we're lucky to have you there. I mean, this stuff happens in state legislatures, and that's been the game of, the pro-Israel lobbies now, is to hit the state legislatures. And, like they did it first, the first version of the BDS law in Arizona was anyone who supports BDS. And then they changed it to be like, what was it? Like something with companies with a certain number of employees or something. So I mean, but the point was they still wanted that law on the books to curb speech and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So all right, let's go to some of my callers. But before I do that, let me throw this comment up on the screen. I don't know if you know this person, but we have Layal saying, I live in Arizona. I'm a huge fan of both of you. I'm so happy this interview is happening. Love to you both. Arizona isn't very blue down ballot, and I've been dreading the upcoming legislative session, but seeing you, Athena, is giving me hope. See that, Athena? You are inspiring everybody. All right, let me bring into our stream here one of our members of NGP calling us from Columbus, Ohio. Mazen, unmute your microphone. Mazen Rasool, he is a Palestinian-American lawyer and a member of NGP out there in Columbus. Mazen, what is your question for Athena?
Thank you, Omar. Hello, Athena, and thank you for joining us, and congratulations on your success and being a member of the legislature there. So I'm going to ask you two questions. One question would be, if someone decides to run for any kind of office, what's the first step to do? Like, do you contact the party if you're like a Democrat or so on? Do you contact the party that you're running with, or do you just start a campaign, or how do you start? What's the first point? And the second question is, so you said you were active before and you're always an activist for Palestinian rights and other causes. Running for an election, how much does your positions on certain matters, such as, for example, BDS or other matters when it comes to Palestine and Israel and so on, how much does that affect you in your campaign and in your work afterwards too? Do you feel a lot of pressure? Is there a lot of impact on that? So how much of your history do they go back to, like in general, in an election, your opponents or so on, and then dig in there and use that against you?
No, I thank you for those questions, and I'm so glad. It sounds like maybe you're considering a run for office. Yes,
I think that's what it sounded like. All right.
So for a lot of the folks watching, you're probably in a similar situation as me, where you're first, second generation American. And the reason that I bring that up, so if you're an immigrant, if your parents are immigrants, or if your grandparents are immigrants, there is a phenomenal organization called New American Leaders. I'm going to repeat that. It's called New American Leaders. And they are throughout many states, although since COVID-19, they've been doing trainings more virtual. But I don't know if they have trainings in Ohio, but you could probably sign up for a training. But they teach us how to run for office. And the organization teaches us from a place of being someone who comes from a new American background, whether it's Palestinian, whether it's Mexican, whether it's Colombian, Indian, whatever the background is. That is actually an asset. And that is actually going to make you a stronger representative, because you represent a viewpoint, you represent a community, you represent a perspective that right now is just not in government. at the level that it should be when you look at our communities and our population. So I would recommend doing candidate trainings and specifically new American leaders, because I remember having that fear. So I did the training in 2015, and I remember talking to the executive director, Sayu Bhashwani. She's amazing, about how afraid I was. I mean, this is like how much Palestinians are demonized and villainized here in this country. And I was like, I don't know if a Palestinian can win in Arizona. And she was like, this is back when Rashida Tlaib was state representative in Michigan. And she was like, well, people have done it in other states before you. And it just was this huge weight lifted off my shoulder. In regards to how much dirt they dig on you, part of it depends on the position that you're running for. If you're running for Congress or if you're running for a federal position, like the machines in both parties, like they really dig deep, and it's, it gets kind of ugly. But even for a state legislature or a city council or a school board, like the more local you get, the less opposition research they do. And it doesn't really nobody's told me, at least to my face, that they're not voting for me because I have Palestinian heritage. Because what I talk about and what I care about is what the vast majority of Arizonans care about, right? I care about fully funding our schools. I care about making sure we have universal health care. I care about protecting our seniors, right? This is something that, regardless of whether you're Palestinian-American or just come from a European background, these are things that impact everyone. I would encourage you to also get involved with your local party, but I mean, if I'm just being honest, come up with a plan to not necessarily rely on them to get elected. It's very much like when you're running for office, if you're not prepared to at least treat it like a part-time job, I've always treated it like a full-time job. Depending on how competitive the race is, it really is oftentimes how much work does the candidate put in. Because if the candidate grinds hard and just goes full in, voters respect that. Voters know who shows up at their doors. Voters know who is contacting them over the phones, through text messages, and ultimately trying to be a voice for them in the community.
But I mean, Mazen, were you listening to Athena before? I mean, she was in demonstrations. She was, I assume, yelling free Palestine at a bunch of those demonstrations, maybe even wrote a few things on Facebook. The point is, who cares what's in your, who cares? This is just me talking. You're Palestinian. They're going to come after you, whether you're really out there Palestinian or whether you are a nice, well-behaved Palestinian. Guess what? They come after you either way. So don't worry about anything that you've ever said or done in your past. If it's something that you believe in and you can back it up with your principle, look what happened. Look what, we have Athena. We have, Rashida says a lot of stuff that somebody might think would be disqualifiers for office, and she's in Congress. And then you have people, I won't say any, well, okay, you have the guy out in California who's running for Congress that tried to play it real safe, so safe that he shook hands with Ehud Barak. And guess what? It didn't work. It didn't work. I would say just be you, bro. Just be you. But I always encourage Palestinians. That's why I love Athena so much. When this thing came up, the BDS thing came up in that Arizona state legislature, and she was like, boom, she ran to it. She didn't say to herself, man, they're going to think I'm doing this just because I'm Palestinian, so let me go try to get someone else to do it. No, she ran to that topic. Sorry, Athena, I'm talking to you. I'm not trying to embarrass you or anything, but she ran to that topic and said, I'm going to attack this head on. And you know what? Her Palestinianness was an asset in that situation, because she can say, I'm doing this because I believe in the First Amendment, but I'm doing this also because this affects my people, my community. And because she led that effort, I remember she was there. There was an army of Palestinian, a figurative army, just for all our guests from the FBI and CIA that are watching. There was a figurative army of Palestinians with us at the Arizona State House that I was there to talk about legal stuff. But guess what? They were there because Athena knew them and asked them to be there to talk about how this affects their kids. Remember that one speaker, Athena, Muhammad, he got up there and said, my kids feel like they can't be who they are when there's a law like this on the books. So, I tell Palestinian candidates, Palestinian it up. Just like be totally, because when you do that, not only will you feel better about yourself, win or lose, but guess what? The community will really, really, really rally behind you. Whereas if you try to play it safe, we're going to start putting question marks. And if you try to play it safe, you might end up shaking hands with somebody, and then you can never come back into our community again. Like never, ever, ever. So that's why I love Athena so much, man. Athena just like, she looks like, hey, I'm Palestinian, and this thing is anti-Palestinian. So guess what? I have to be the one that talks about it. So that's why I love her so much. Mazen, did you have a second question? I'm sorry. Did you have a second question?
I asked and she answered both.
Okay, good. She answered both. That was good. That's wonderful. Mazen, man, listen, I know you haven't made any commitments on the air tonight, but if you ever make that announcement,
I'll call you.
Whenever you make that announcement, let us know. Maybe we'll we'll do a whole show, NGP Talks with Mazen Rasul, candidate. So, but we're all here for you, man. I love you, bro. Thank you so much for joining. All right. Thanks a lot, Mazen. All right, let me go now to, I see Nidal in the waiting room. Nidal, if you turn on your camera, I'll get you in. I saw Omar Turk in there a second. I don't know where he went, but, let me go first, Nidal, to Omar. We have joining us, I think from Arizona. Is it from Arizona? Is Omar Turk. Hi, Omar, how are you?
How you doing? Hi.
Hi, Omar.
Hi. So,
Speak up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but just speak up. Be louder.
All right. So, this is awesome. I was born in Arizona in 1966. I was part of the Turk, the El Mariati, and the Tome families, which laid down the foundation for, the Arab American Muslim Palestinian community in Arizona. So when I was born, here there was none of that. There was no community at all. So having you being elected official for Arizona is something we could have probably never dreamed of back then. So congratulations, it's a huge step for us. Being born and raised in Arizona, I'm in Arizona now. I know a little bit of Arizona politics and the history of it. But Arizona is really not a bad place. It's not as hillbilly as everybody thinks, or a lot of people think. There is some progressive, but the current politics right now, we have some people in the House and the state, the U.S. House, Biggs and Gosar, especially. Yeah, those guys. Just, horrible. And then Kelly Townsend also. And
wait, isn't Gosar the guy who his whole family campaigned against him or something?
Yeah.
That's that guy.
It's the best campaign ever.
Yeah.
They're both horrible. And so, but we had Sinema when she was elected. I was kind of excited that she won, but she's been kind of a disappointment in some of her things. She was against the BDS. And she was a little bit disappointing. She really wasn't. She was more middle, maybe a little middle right even. And now we have, was it Kelly now? Mark Kelly. So I don't know if you have any, contact with them or, any opportunity to have contacts with them. But I know Sinema has been disappointing. And I don't think that.
Well, so Athena, let me ask you to build on Omar's question after he bragged about his whole family and all their history in Arizona. But
we've probably been at the same functions.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. But
Salam right? He was in Arizona when he was.
Well, Salam al-Mariyati has a lot of political problems with normalization with ADL and CVE, and we won't get into any of that. But anyway, let me ask you this, Athena, to build on Omar's question, which is, you're kind of like me. You're sort of like a lefty in the Democratic Party. Are you sometimes this is in the law what we call a leading question, Athena? Are you sometimes frustrated by some of the limitations, in the Democratic Party, whether it's Palestinian rights or other progressive issues that you're fighting for?
It can definitely be frustrating. But it's just where we are at today versus where we were at 10 years ago.
Right.
It's remarkable to see how much power and how much the progressive movement has grown in this country, to where I can only imagine where we're going to be in the next 10 years, where we're going to have more people who are openly pro human rights across the board, which includes the Palestinian people, where we're going to have people who are going to call it for what it is. Like, the reality is most definitely the Republican Party, but also Democrats have the same guilt on their hands. Our economic system, and I think this is part of the reason why Republicans, and unfortunately we don't have enough Democrats who stand up to it, but we have more Democrats than Republicans for sure. But I think part of the reason why communities like ours get scapegoated, and why we see these draconian laws that are targeting us, is also because they want us to continue to focus on that, which we should be focused on that, and we should prevent attacks on our community. But they want to do that so we can't see the fundamental tax restructuring that the Republicans passed in 2018, where we're all going to see a tax increase unless you're like a billionaire, which I doubt anyone watching here is a billionaire. They don't want you to see the cuts to education, and the fact that students are paying are having to go into generations upon generations of debt to get a college degree, whereas like a generation ago or 2 generations ago, it was free to go to college almost. When you're relatively speaking about the cost, they don't want us to focus on the fact that literally we are entering an era where home ownership is going to become a rarity, instead of like the foundation of building your wealth and entering the middle class. So I think it's like, I find myself pushing my fellow Democrats on both fronts, right? On the racial justice front and gender justice and LGBTQ justice. Like, we need to be doing more and more and more, and these communities cannot wait another day. But it's also like the reality that we are confronting and we are challenging the power of billionaires in this country, and not just this country. Like, we're challenging the wealthy who just control the entire world. And so I think we've come a far way, but we have so much more to go. And every single victory, even if a Democrat isn't a perfect Democrat, as Omar was alluding to, even just blocking a Republican in a state like Arizona is a victory and is a step in the right direction, because we have a foundation, we have something to build on, so that the next go around, the next opportunity, if the US Senate seat ever becomes open, or redistricting, we're going to get a new congressional seat, we can get better, more progressive Democrats in there. But we have to have a foundation to begin with. And in a state like Arizona that's traditionally been conservative, that bench is being built right now. It's very exciting, and I'm excited to be a part of it, and I'm excited to be on the inside pushing my party to be more progressive and to be more embracing of what essentially is our base.
Yeah.
The people that vote for us.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Omar.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. I don't know if we have any more guests, if you want to turn your camera on, but Athena. Oh, okay, good. There we go. Let's go to Dr. Nidal Jabbour. He'll be our last guest tonight. Dr. Nidal from Michigan. What's going on?
Hey, how are you guys?
Good.
Good. Wonderful.
Thank you, Amir, and thank you, NGP, for these nice and great talks. Congratulations, Athena. We are proud of you. Thanks for all your efforts and all the work you did to get where you are now, and for representing our voice. I also want to be thankful for you and Amir for your work regarding the BDS and trying to push back against all the efforts that that's targeting us and targeting the BDS movement. My question is, we all need to work and protect our right to BDS because it's a constitutional right, and this is the First Amendment, I think. Is there any legal or legislative or political way for us to even move beyond this point and not just be on the defensive to protect our right for the BDS, but also to hold the United States and to hold Israel accountable for their violations of the international law. We know that settlements are illegal under international law. We know that occupation is illegal under international law, and Israel is violating the law. And the United States, by supporting Israel and turning a blind eye to them, is also violating the international law, and they are complicit into this crime that's been happening for 70 years. What are our legislative, legal paths that we can pursue to not just be on the defensive, but also be more proactive and ask for our rights?
Yeah.
Thanks, Nidal.
That's a great question. Thank you so much for that question. I think it's all hands on deck. The tides are changing, and as a Democrat, one of the exciting things about the party and about the grassroots folks who make up the Democratic Party is specifically on the issue of Palestine. It really has gone in favor. It really has moved further to the left in favor of, again, like we're talking about basic human rights. We're talking about the Palestinian right to self-determination and the Palestinian right to have their human rights protected, have their civil rights respected. And so like there is one party in the United States where it's becoming increasingly an important issue for the voters, for the electorate. And I think that's good news for our community. I think some of the things that we can do is very simple. This gets back to Mazen's question about should we be getting involved in our local party? I think, yes, you should be getting involved locally at your party. The parties have this thing called precinct committee men and precinct committee women. It's actually the most local elected office there is. And from there, you can start shaping the party's platform. And you can start engaging the Palestinian community and other communities in local elections. So like that capital, when you become a super volunteer in your local community, you build political capital. Like your elected officials, and maybe you end up running for office and become an elected official someday, but your elected officials start taking your phone calls. Your elected officials start meeting with you, start speaking with you. They care about your community and your opinion because they know you personally, because you've gotten involved. And I think that's where, when it came to the bill that was conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, which we know the two are not the same. There was a Palestinian man who lived in one of the districts that was very involved in the Democratic Party in that district, and he had his legislator's cell phone number and was like dialing it up every day. Where are you at on this bill? Where are you at on this bill? And it was part of the strategy to hold people in line. Had we not had people from the community who were active, who already had these relationships, it would have been more challenging. So there's so much that you can do at the local level, and you can support efforts locally, but a lot of that then builds up in supporting the national opportunities that we have, which with this new class of congressmen and congresswomen that we're seeing, with Jamal Bowman, with Cori Bush, with others, this progressive class that's coming in, I think there's an opportunity nationally for us to push for more rights for the Palestinians that we traditionally haven't seen from the United States.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do, but it's definitely moving in the right direction. Thanks, Nidal. We got to let you go.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. All right, Athena, I think that brings us to the end, man. I mean, thank you again so much, not for just joining us tonight, but for everything that you do. People, tonight we've been talking to Representative Athena Salman, Palestinian-American State House Representative from Arizona, Arabs in the desert. From Arizona, and she has been standing up for us really every chance she gets, not only standing up for the progressive values that a lot of us believe in, but being our voice to stand up for Palestinian rights when need be. And I've seen it with my own eyes, and I can tell you now, Athena, this is we're a 501c3. We're starting a 501c4 soon, so we can start endorsing people. But awesome. We're still a 501c3. So if we can't say anything, but if people want to learn more about you and your political career, what is the website that they can go to?
Yeah, you can go to salmanforarizona.com, or follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter. Facebook is the /Salman4AZ, and then Twitter and Instagram is just Athena Salman. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show tonight. This is just put me in like such an amazing mood. Like, it's so nice to just be among good company and talk about our community.
Yeah, well, listen, Athena, we love you. We're proud of you. Keep doing what you're doing. And I'm going to personally make sure I do everything I can do to make sure everyone keeps following you all the time. All right, Athena, love you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. All right, everybody. Once again, you've been watching NGP Talks here on Facebook Live. And yes, we are NGP, New Generation for Palestine. We are a Palestinian membership organization to create a network of Palestinian Americans to empower each other and to bond with each other. So on behalf of all the members of NGP, I'm Ahmed Zahar, the president of NGP. I want to thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we will see you all very soon. If you'd like to become a member of NGP and you're Palestinian, and hopefully Athena will become a member tonight, ngpalestine.org, ngpalestine.org. You go become a voting member of our organization. We have board elections coming up. So on behalf of NGP and everyone who's a member of our organization and the board, thanks for joining us, and see you all very soon.